perhaps we should start. It's a great pleasure to welcome everyone to this webinar this afternoon, and to this event of the Las Casas Institute based at Blackfriars Hall in the University of Oxford. I'm delighted to introduce our speaker this afternoon, Professor Carlos Espaliú Berdud, who, as you can see on this wonderful background slide, is professor at the Universidad Fernando III in Seville. He is the full professor of public international law and international relations at the university, as well as being, to our delight and pride, an associate member of the Las Casas Institute. Carlos has published widely academic papers on a number of highly important and pressing social issues, including the use of disinformation. He's published on immigration, on human rights and European identity, on maritime security and the wider security of the European Union, and he's published on the development of European law. So we're very grateful to you, Carlos, for leading a conversation this afternoon on what is clearly also a very important and difficult subject, this possibility of an international society or community in a broken world. I think many of us feel at the moment that perhaps things are more broken than they have been for a very long time, perhaps in our lifetimes. And it really does become hard for people to hope and to think there might be something better that we can work for at the present time. So thank you for talking to us this afternoon. Just one final thing before I hand over to you, and that's to encourage everyone who's joining us, if you have questions that you'd like Carlos to address after his presentation, do please type those into the chat box and we'll be able to see those and share those and respond to them. Carlos, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you to you, Father Shin, for inviting me to give this talk. Today is my first activity in the framework of Las Casas Institute of Social Justice. I'm delighted for it. I hope it is fruitful. I hope we can have a fruitful discussion afterwards. Also, thanks to everyone for being here present today. So this will be the structure of my presentation. Let's say I will start by the presentation. First of all, explaining why I have chosen these words, Civitas versus Totus Orbis, some words for the chosen of terminology. In Roman times, the word Civitas had different meanings, all related to the term city, but in general, it seems to have referred not so much to the physical city, for which the word urbs was more appropriate, but to the political organization. And for example, for Cicero, Civitas was a synonym of society, city-state, state-city, more or less referring to local or municipal or national society. And then I would like to confront this word or term Civitas referring to a municipal or national society to the concept of Totus Orbis, which was a term coined by the famous Spaniard sorry, where is the presentation? To the famous the famous 16th century Spaniard Dominican Francis of Vitoria. For him, Totus Orbis was an international, a global community in which every human being, every people, person and people join together in this international community because they share their common bond of human nature. Also, in this for this talk, I will use this definition of international society and the definition of international community. For international society, I will use the famous and classic definition of Bull in the framework of the English School of International Relations: a society of states exists when a group of states conscious of certain common interests and common values form a society in the sense that they consider themselves to be bound by a common set of rules in their relations with one another and share in the working of common institutions. That will be the definition of international society that I will use in this presentation today. As far as international community is concerned, I will use more or less the definition of Paulus, where a society emphasizes factual interconnection and interrelations, community looks to values, beliefs, and subjective feelings. Therefore, for me, an international community can thus be understood as a meaningful economics, political, cultural, or security union. Within it, states, individuals, companies, and other entities that are its subjects can share common values, beliefs, subjective feelings, cultural characteristics, norms, and goals, and act together to address common challenges and promote common interests. So that will be the two definitions that I will use here today for this presentation. Having said that, my intention is to think if it is still possible to think of a kind of international society of states or sovereign entities or of the human community in general, or whether, on the contrary, nationalism or imperialism are the natural or predominant forms of humanity. In short, Civitas versus Totus Orbis. So I think the moment to do that is important because we see that there are many wars happening, also wars which are not very relevant for the protagonists. For example, Russia, who is a permanent member of the Security Council, who should be the guardian of the security system implemented by the United Nations, is one who is violating the prohibition of the use of force in international society set forth in Article 2.4 of the United Nations Charter. So there are difficult moments, as Father Finn said at the beginning. Also, we see also in national societies a lot of division growing. For example, in Spain, it's very, very clear, but also in Western countries, even the European Union with the Brexit and so on. So the war in the Middle East, the China challenging the security in some part of the world, in South China Sea, and so on. So we see a moment of history, a moment of the history of humanity in which the division is a predominant fact that is, I think, is nobody can discuss that, unfortunately. So that's why I wanted to share with you this discussion, this presentation, in order to find out possibilities to work again to build up our international society, even to move forward to the formation of an international community. Because for me, as I said before, meanwhile, society is something which is a de facto association. A community is not only a de facto association, but it's something more connected to feelings, to perception, to culture, to history, to religion, to beliefs, to values, to goals, etc. So community, international community is something which goes behind international society, something in which all the participants of that association have common bonds, strong bonds of subjectivity and normativity. So to do that, I will start, I think, reflecting on the natural sociability of mankind. For me, if we can distinguish a natural sociability on ourselves and in the person and in the groups, then we can build up societies, national and international society, and perhaps not international community. But if we don't part from the ground that sociability of mankind, natural sociability of mankind, then it's easier to think that peace is a utopia and war is the natural status of mankind. So I think my personal perception of that is that you can distinguish the same trends in yourself, that we have, all of us, one tendency to selfishness, in which we see of only our interest, and at the same time we feel another strength or tendency in ourselves to others, to open ourselves, to work together with others. I think we can see that as well in the individuals, but also in the group, no? So that would be this tendency, on the one hand, to selfishness, and on the other hand, the tendency to work together, to cooperate, and so on, to look for common grounds of interest. And then I explore where the main tendencies in human history, in philosophy, what the main thinker of the world, in all the civilization, all the cultures of the religions, what they have said about that, if there is or not a natural sociability of human beings. And then I found that the main or the first great author that discovered the natural sociability of mankind is Aristotle, of course, the famous Greek philosopher. In his book, Politics, he said that hence it is evident that the state is a creation of nature and that man is by nature a political animal. And he who by nature and not by mere accident is without a state is either a bad man or above humanity. So he provided us with this important idea that man is by nature a political animal. This is our background. But then also in Roman times, the Stoics with Cicero and Seneca also share in that thought. Cicero, for example, in his book De Officiis, he said he put forward the idea that human beings are naturally inclined towards community life and that they have duties and responsibility towards other members of society. Seneca, for his part, in his book, De Beneficis, he also put forward the idea that human beings are meant to live in community and that the chain of favors and benefits is a fundamental part of social relation. Moving forward to the Islamic civilization or religion or culture, I found that there are also very important authors that share in that conception, the natural sociability of mankind. For example, Al-Farabi, in an important book, The Political Regime, he said that human beings are naturally inclined to live in communities and participate in social relations, reflecting an understanding of sociability as inherent in human nature. Also, Ibn Rushd called Averroes in Spain and Europe history, in a also very important book, Middle Commentary on Aristotle Ethics. He highlighted the importance of sociability as a fundamental part of human nature and its role in the realization of virtue, well-being in society. Then in the Christian culture, among others, among many others, because I think it is a common belief in the Christian culture and religion. For example, we can look for the Saint Thomas Aquinas opinion, and he wrote a lot of that about the society and so on, politics. But in the Summa Theologica, in Prima Secunde, in question 90, he reflects upon the human beings are naturally inclined to live in society and to organize themselves into political communities in order to seek the common good. It's a very important contribution to the history of philosophy. As well, Francisco de Vitoria, as I mentioned before, in his book, De Jure Belli, he said expressly that therefore it appears that friendship among men exists by natural law, and it is against nature to shun the society of harmless folk. Also in the Christian tradition, some years later, Francisco Suarez, also in the Spanish Golden Century, a Jesuit philosopher, in his book De Legibus ad Deo Legislatore, also expressed this conception: man is a social animal requiring by his very nature of a civil life and intercourse with other men. Therefore, it is necessary that he should live rightly, not only as a private person, but also as a part of a community. And yeah, also some decades afterwards, a very important opinion is the one of Hugo Grotius, because he's there a bridge between the Christianity of the natural law based on Christianity to modernity, also sharing the natural law, but grounded in other sources. For Hugo Grotius, who is also a very important figure in international law, he said that man is, to be sure, an animal, but an animal of a superior kind, much farther removed from all other animals than the different kinds of animal are from one another. Evidence on this point may be found in the many traits peculiar to the human species. But among the traits characteristic of man is an impelling desire for society, an impelling desire for society, that is for the social life, not of any and every sort, but peaceful and organized according to the measure of his intelligence with those who are of his own kind. This social trend the Stoics call sociableness, stated as universal truth. Therefore, the assertion that every animal is impelled by nature to seek only its own good cannot be conceded. So also I look for which was the opinion of the Marxists, and they share more or less this, at least in some part, this conception of the natural sociability of mankind. For Marxist authors, they agree that humans are inherently social beings, but they view the sociability not as fixed natural characteristic, but as a dynamic and historically contingent feature. And for Marx and Engels, which are more or less the founders of this current, human sociability is rooted in the need for cooperation to satisfy material needs such as food, shelter, and protection. Through labor and production, humans engage in collective activity, forming social relationships and structures. Engels also emphasized that humans become distinct from animals, not merely through consciousness, but through social labor, which is inherently cooperative. But further on, they let's say they disagree on the evolution that of the consequences of the natural sociability of mankind with other authors that we have seen before, and they of course they saw this conflict in society between classes and so on that we are very familiar with. And for them, for Marx and Engels, for the main founders of this current of Marxism, in capitalist societies, the natural sociability of humans is distorted. The alienation of workers from their labor, the products they produce, and their fellow humans undermines authentic social connection. This alienation masks the potential for a genuinely human, cooperative, and emancipated sociability that could emerge under socialist or communist. So that differ in the evolution, but they agreed with other previous authors in the concept of the natural sociability of mankind. Also in other religions, for example, in Taoism, even it's not very clear, or at least I don't see as clear and in previous author that idea, but I can distinguish more or less this opinion. They agree in that conception. For Taoism, Tao Te Ching, which is one of the foundations of philosophical Taoism, part of this conception is presented in a somewhat nebulous way. For example, he said that the sage does not store things for himself. The more one does for others, the more he has for himself. The more one gives to others, the more to keeps for himself. So I think we can see from that he shares on this natural sociability of mankind, even if not extremely clear. Also in the Hindu tradition, in the very old books, in the Veda, some Upanishads, I don't know if I pronounce it well, but present the idea that all living things are interconnected and that there is an underlying unity to all existence known as Brahman. On the other side, I found other authors that are not in favor of this natural sociability of mankind, and they oppose it. For example, in Western tradition, Thomas Hobbes, in his book Leviathan, he found that by nature, human beings are selfish and they relate among each other with violence, and that projected to the international society means war. Also, Jean-Jacques Rousseau, also he said that human society viewed with a calm and dispassionate gaze seems at first to exhibit only the violence of powerful men and the oppression of the weak. So you see also he highlight the differences, the division among society, among people, and he stressed the violence and war, conflict and war among person and people and countries. No? So also in another Chinese branch of philosophy or let's say or religious beliefs, in the legalism, also they think that they believe that people are inherently selfish and need to be controlled by strict laws and regulation aimed at maintaining social order and state power. So also they have this idea not of natural sociability of mankind, but on the other side, on the contrary, they think that normally human need authority to impose order, because the natural sociability, the nature of man is conflict and war. So I move forward. Having said that, I think we can end up this section saying that if there is not a unanimity, there is a consensus or a general tendency to believe in all times and all religions, or well, as far as I know, that in general terms, even there are some opponents, that there is a natural sociability of mankind, and then we can build up on that to see if there is an international society of an international community or communities in the second section. Let me go now to this this part. Yeah, now I want to see how the international society has been constructed during history, how it appears, what is the situation now of the international society. So starting from this observation that there is a certain consensus, if not unanimity, on the natural sociability of the human person, we can continue our argumentation toward the possibility of the existence and maintenance of an international society, and finally towards that of an international global community or several international subglobal communities. So first of all, there will be an explanation of the formation of today's international society in terms of its constituent actor and subject in numerical actors and subject. I think at the beginning in society, of course, we found that beyond natural integrants of society, that are the individual and the family and the tribe, as at a point in the history, individuals and groups, family, they associate themselves in a political society, forming towns, cities, and states, or regions or states, and they gave themselves rules and institutions to regulate, to govern those entities. They started creating law, and then when these political entities relate among each other, the states relate among each other, then appears the international relations. And when the states or sovereign entities relate among each other, the international relations appear. And when those international relations consolidate, then at the end of 16th century in Europe, the international society that we know now appear. And even this is a very Eurocentric conception, but of course it is a challenge, this conception, but it's normally assumed, it's not discussed in international relations. So you see that when that international relation among state appeared, began the international society, and then, but states are not the only agent or subject of international society, but together with state, there are also human beings, individuals, and commercial, tourist, cultural, religious, or simply personal motives are at the root of this individual relationship between groups from different nations, people, or the state. So individual, state relate among each other, and in the 18th century, the technological advances associated with the first industrial revolution multiply these individual international interactions, making international relations between states more frequent, more constant, and more fundamental. At that time, then, the states decided to create a new entity in international relations, international society, which were the international organization, the first of which were the institutions that regulated navigation on the multinational rivers of all Europe, and then a phenomenon that was consolidated with the League of Nations at the beginning of the 20th century. Since then, as a result of the multiplication of integration between individuals, companies, and states, favored by the technological revolution, a large number of international organizations have been created to channel all this cooperation and interaction. Accordingly, this exponential multiplication of international relations at all levels has required a gigantic growth of international law, the legal system that regulates international society and the relation between its actor and subject. In addition, nowadays, in addition to that, the revolution brought about by the internet within the technological era has globalized today's world and brought about human relations with impressive intensity and speed, albeit virtually. This has given individuals a greater role in the new international relations, often to build, but sometimes to destroy. Therefore, we can say, as Edith Bron Weiss put it, that we live in a kaleidoscopic world, or rather a kaleidoscopic digital world. It seems quite clear, moreover, that this growth of international society from the numerical point of view in relation to the actor and subject that make it up and dynamize it cannot be reversed. So I think this growth in international society from the numerical point of view cannot be reversed. But also we can think about other way of growing in the international society, taking into account the nature of the relations. I think I share this idea or this way of presenting things, the history of growing of international society, with Professor Schwarzenberger. He spoke about 3 stages in international relation history. First of all, was the power relation between states. Second one, reciprocity, and the third, cooperation. For him, this first stage of power relation between states was in those moments imperialism and domination played a leading role, but the second stage in international relation history is the one of reciprocity, in which, among other things, the regime of diplomatic immunities emerged. Also, the reciprocity of concessions as expressed in extradition treaties, treaties of establishment, transit treaties, copyright protection treaties, trademark treaties, and so on. And finally, in the third stage, international society evolved toward relation of coordination, in which states manage to coordinate in order to face problems of general interest, and the legal system for refugees, the fight against drug trafficking, the fight against trafficking in human beings, and one could add nowadays the protection of the environment or areas beyond national jurisdiction, etc., emerge. So I think this is the stage in which we are present, the third stage of cooperation. But I would like to emphasize that it's very important in this stage. This is the graphic representation of this kaleidoscopic digital world, expression coined by Professor Edith Bron Weiss. I think I would like to stress the fact that this level of cooperation that we witness, let's say nowadays or some years ago, mainly also depends of this cooperation in terms of security. So after World War II, humanity founded United Nations, and all the states gave the Security Council the responsibility to use force against the violators of the prohibition of use of force in international relations. I think this is a very important fact, a very important issue, a demonstration of the high level of cooperation that humanity attained some decades ago. We can, having seen that there is clearly, it is undoubted that an international society of nowadays, based on so many international organizations that are set up in the world, in all the continents, and it's undoubtful that there is an international society also integrated made up not only of state, but also individuals, companies, states, international organizations, and so on. There is clearly an international society, but is there at the same time an international community? So beyond international society, which is obvious, there is also an international community in that sense that I said before, not only association of states, but a factual association of states, but association of states sharing values, beliefs, feelings, and that's another issue. So I think can we talk about a global, universal, international community? Let's see. But at least we can see that is, in my opinion, and the many others as well, we can find a clear, at least sub-regional international community, which is the European Union, because we share law, we share culture, we share beliefs, Christian religion, light, spirit, and so on, conception of life. I think European Union will be a clear example of in today's world of an international community, even it is regional and not universal. There are other candidates in other parts of the world, in America, Asia, and Africa as well, other international organizations that are channeling cooperation, and they are moving forward real integration in that sense that European Union witness today. But if they are also talking now about a real global international community, universal world international community, that is more doubtful if there exists international global community, in my opinion. There are some threads that can allow to speak to perhaps to the beginning of an international global community. For example, we can rely on the constitutional character of the United Nations Charter. For example, there are some hints in the Charter of San Francisco, the founding Charter of the United Nations, that speak about the existence of a true constitution in the international society. For example, the word charter instead of covenant, that was the normal term in international law. Treaties, agreements, and covenants are more common. Meanwhile, the word charter, that is more common among the national societies, the Constitution of Nations, inside the Constitution of Nations. Also, for example, Article 103 in the United Nations Charter call on the existence of a constitutional character of the United Nations Charter. For example, this article says that in the event of a conflict between the obligation of the member of the United Nations under the present Charter and their obligation under any other international agreement, their obligation under the present Charter shall prevail. So that's a unique trait in international law, that United Nations Charter is above all the other treaties that member states can agree upon in the present and in the future. So that's very unique characteristic of the United Nations Charter. But also, as I said before, it's my opinion, is very important. It's a clear threat of formation of an international community, global international community. The fact that all the states in the 45 in the United Nations Charter have entrusted the Security Council with the responsibility to implement the security system in the United Nations, and they have the responsibility to use of force against the violators of the prohibition of the using of force in international society. In Article 24.1 is embodied this, let's say, handing over the responsibility of states in security matters. This handed over is embodied in Article 224.1 of the Charter. In order to ensure prompt and effective action by the United Nations, its members confer on the Security Council primary responsibility for the maintenance of international peace and security, and agree that in carrying out its duties under this responsibility, the Security Council acts on their behalf. I think this is very important thread of states, because they handed over to the Security Council its competence, its sovereign competence of using force, that before of that, humanity has witnessed how the state has used force when they wanted. Now, in the United Nations Charter, the state have given to the 5 permanent members, mainly the responsibility to maintain the use of the peace and international relations. That's very, very interesting. But then, there are others. There are other institutions, international society or international relation that speaks about the formation, incipient formation of a global international community. For example, the notion of jus cogens, we can deal with in depth later on the discussion if you want. I don't know if you are familiar with this institution. Also with the erga omnes obligations, international responsibility towards the international community as a whole, crimes against humanity, common heritage of mankind. Those are institutions, legal institutions, international relation institution that speaks about the incipient formation of a true international global community. But then, if that was the case, what's happened now? That we see clearly a division has emerged again, and I don't repeat myself, but it's obvious that war division has erupted again, and the world of today is less united than it was some decades ago. So then why is that? Why we have come to this current situation? Some decades ago, we were almost there. We were almost there in the formation of an international community, but now we see division all around the world. Why is that? What has changed? What are the causes of this division of today's world? I think there are 3 factors, mainly 2, and then a third one, which is more or less a halfway among others. But I would say the forgetfulness of the idea of God. No, I think that is shared by other authors. For example, well, more importantly, St. Augustine. He wrote in The City of God, when people turn away from God and the moral principle he teaches, they fall into selfishness, envy, and hatred of their fellow human beings, which inevitably leads to discord and violence. I think this is a conception that I support. I think the forgetfulness of the idea of God is leading to the forgetfulness of the idea of brotherhood among human beings. So why are we brothers if we don't have a father? We don't have a God that is our father. How are we brothers? And then we see each other as rivals, if not enemies. The second factor that I see, but there are many other authors who show that as well, the forgetfulness of God as an important element in the vision of society of today. The second factor I would like to highlight, there are many others, but I wanted to put forward these 2 for perhaps for the discussion afterwards, the forgetting of the horrors of war. I think this generation has not seen the World War, the previous century people saw, and we have forgotten these horrors of war, and we don't know what it is, and people play with that idea. I think in a very responsible manner. No. Also, for example, in this sense, I think I can bring about the idea of Winston Churchill, that he said in a speech that it is my earnest hope that pondering upon the past may give guidance in days to come, enable a new generation to repair some of the errors of former years, and thus govern in accordance with the needs of glory of man, the awful unfolding scene of the future. So Churchill insisted on reflecting upon the past to avoid the same errors in the future, but also, for example, share that conception George Santayana, a Spanish writer based in the US, that in 1922 wrote a book where he stated that those who cannot remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Now it's a phrase that is written in a building, Auschwitz facilities, to remember, to remind people what happened there, the horror of the past, concentration camp, to avoid to repeat them in the future. No? I think in the third factor of this division in today's society, I think is, of course, the rising of the authoritarianism, and perhaps we see that in some part of the world, Russia, perhaps China, other part of the world, and the neglect of federalism. I think, let's say, a third way, no? I wanted to highlight to that today also, because we celebrate the 200th anniversary, the 400th anniversary of the birth of Immanuel Kant. For him also, he proposed to achieve peace in this famous book, Perpetual Peace, very famous book in international relations. He proposed a sort of federalism. The practicability of this idea of federalism, which is gradually to extend to all states and so lead to perpetual peace, can be demonstrated. For when fortune so disposes that a powerful and enlightened people can constitute themselves a republic, which is why by its nature lends itself to perpetual peace, it becomes a center of federal union for other states. So in my sense, also this growing or raising of authoritarianism in international society, and the forget of this idea of federalism, the democracy, and so on, is also leading to this division that we witness not only in international society, but also in internal society as well, with Brexit, for example, division in internal society, as we see nowadays. At least, perhaps, of course, I think a ray of hope in the fact that even if many people think that China, the growing of China, is also a tendency to division in international society, I think that it's not very clear that the growing of importance in China, becoming the more important power in the world, is clearly leading to more division in international society. It's a risk, of course, but I think I found among Chinese author and Chinese philosophy, let's say, or doctrine, some ray of hope in this conception of community of shared future for mankind. So that also was brought about in a Congress of the Communist Party, 18th Congress of Communist Parties some years ago, and it has been also reflected upon by a professor of international relations, Sang Hui, who said that in promoting mutually beneficial cooperation, we should raise awareness about human beings having a community of shared future. A country should accommodate to legitimate concern of others when pursuing its own interests, and it should promote common development of all countries when advancing its own development. Countries should establish a new type of global development partnership that is more equitable and balanced, stick together in times of difficulty, both share rights and shoulder obligation, and boost the common interest of mankind. So I don't see in the doctrine of Chinese ideology a clear movement to division or to break down all the international society of today's, but of course we will see. But at least it's not clear, it's not evident that the growing of China is directly leading to more division in international society. Perhaps on the contrary, I don't know. Let's see. So moving forward to my conclusion. We see that the current crossroad at which the world finds itself, with a division unprecedented in decades, with several terrible wars causing enormous destruction of life and property, with the cloud of doubt that genocide are being committed in these wars, has led us to question whether the existence of an international society and community is possible. Or on the contrary, nationalism and imperialism are once again winning the day in human history. In this talk, we have examined the evolution of international society as we know it from the emergence of modern European states at the end of 15th century to the present day. And despite the current fragmentation, there is no denying the number of actors involved in international relations has grown steadily over centuries, and has the variety and depth of the legal institution of international law that govern relations between the actors of international society. Indeed, the great diversity of common interest between states and the possibility and needs for cooperation between individuals, companies, and states themselves speak for themselves of an indestructible substratum for the existence of an international society. What is more, this substratum of possibilities and needs for cooperation between the various actors of international relations is based on the natural sociability of human beings, which, as we have seen, is generally acknowledged, if not unanimously, by numerous authors from almost all time and cultures. Although there are also elements that allow us to affirm that international society was moving towards a level of cooperation and integration that could sustain the emergence of a true international community, we understand that it was not yet possible to speak openly of such a transformation having taken place. Among the elements pointing towards the formation of a global community, we can see the emergence of jus cogens, erga omnes obligations, the notion of common heritage of mankind, and the United Nations Charter itself, especially in terms of the security system it established, which had constitutional features in international society. While it was premature to speak of an international community at the global level, it was possible to establish the existence of a genuine regional or subglobal international community in relation to the European Union and its member states. And other regional systems were emerging, as I said before, in America, Africa, or Asian continent. However, this evolution of international society towards the emergence of a global international community or more regional international communities has broken down with increasing conflicts that have arisen in recent years, which are very reminiscent of the world situation before the First World War. I believe that the causes of this resurgence of imperialism and nationalism and of war which is the child of such an unhappy marriage, lie in the spiritual and transcendental crisis of humanity and in the neglect of the evils that human conflict entails. In the first place, the blurring of the idea of God as the common father of humanity implies the loss of the sense of brotherhood among men. And secondly, I understand that the present generation, which has not been a victim of the world wars, does not perceive in its death the treasure of peace that it holds in its hands, acquired by previous generations. Knowledge of history does not prevent the repetition of mistakes, but it does help to avoid them, or at least to condition decision makers who are aware of the enormous consequences of war. Much of this sensibility of the current global situation is due to the responsibility of the permanent members of the United Nations Security Council, who have failed to live up to their privileges. Russia has launched a war of aggression in Ukraine, and the United States repeatedly vetoes any real solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. They are betraying the pact that the whole of humanity made with them in 1945 to surrender the sovereign capacity to use force in exchange for an institutional system in which the great powers became the guarantors of world security. On the other hand, while China is increasingly assuming a central role in international relations and global security, and while it is conducting shows of force in Taiwan and the South China Sea, that not appear so far to be seeking to displace the United States as the hegemonic power, nor to replace the system of international relations based on norms and values that the United Nations and the Pax Americana have sought to establish. It is not a bad sign, at least in the sense that the current structure of international society, which was founded on the United Nations security system, is definitely in a state of flux. It is to be hoped, therefore, that the battle between Civitas versus Totus Orbis as an indicator of nationalism and imperialism will not be decided in favor of Civitas. So that puts an end to my presentation.
Thank you very much, Carlos. Thank you for such a rich presentation. There's a lot there that we should think about and discuss. I would encourage people, if you have a question, do please just type it into the chat box, and then we can see that it's there and ask you to give your question. Carlos, if I could start off.
Yes, please.
You were dividing at the very beginning. You were sort of contrasting those philosophers or thinkers who accepted the natural sociability of humanity and those who rejected it.
Yes.
I wonder, is there an intermediate position? I was thinking of the writings and the ideas of René Girard, where it seems that unity is at least partially achieved in human communities by scapegoating some other, so that, as it were, yes, we have the international community of the European Union, but we also have, if you like, all those who are being kept out from the Union, and the problems that are associated with migration, and the attempt to seal off the EU. And one could think of other cases where a unity between parties is achieved, an agreement as a way of directing one's hostility and violence towards a third party. Is that something we have to take into consideration?
No, of course. I think I try to present briefly some more representative ones of those, let's say, currents that believe that there is a natural sociability of mankind. Others, authors who represent the current against it. Now, of course, there are many nuances. There are, and there are many positions between. There are many positions in between. But I think it was important to look for what were the more dominant perception of that, of the natural sociability of human beings, because I really think if you don't pass from that, for that ground, then it's much more difficult to believe in the peaceful relations between men, no? And
Yes.
societies and countries and states and international organizations. I think if you don't part from the ground of the natural sociability of mankind, you are building on shifting sands, you know. And so that for me that was very important to find out if my personal perception that we find in ourselves these two tendencies, first to cooperate with other, at the same time to fight against other,
Yes.
and to conflict, then at least is shared by other authors, which were the status of the philosophy in that. I found that most of the authors from different times and perspectives share that perception. But of course, there are millions of positions in between, medium-term position that you know.
We have two questions that have come into the chat. Can I ask David if he'd like to unmute himself and then give that first question?
Okay, thank you very much, Richard. Thank you very much, Professor, for this very interesting, informative talk, very rich talk. So my question is about the concept of Christianitas. How can you compare the concept of Christianitas, Christian world, like in medieval times, to the concept of Civitas, like international society right now, or Totus Orbis? How would you compare those concepts, Christianitas and Civitas and Totus Orbis? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David, for your question and to be there. I think Christianitas, as far as I know, is only referred to Christian world. But on the other side, Totus Orbis is the whole world. Francis of Vitoria thought that the whole of humanity, Christian and not Christian, believers and not believers, also share in the human nature, and because of that, they are part of a universal community, which he called Totus Orbis. So the whole world, Christian and not Christian. So Totus Orbis is bigger than Christianitas, which is only, as far as I know, the world, the Christian world.
Thank you. We also have a question from Professor Scott Thomas. Scott, would you like to unmute yourself?
Sure. Thank you very, very much, Carlos. It's very good to see you, and thank you for your presentation. We'll have a discussion. I probably have about 15 questions. But
start by the first.
Yes, but basically, it's really interesting, of course, that you talk about Francesco Vittoria representing this international
community,
I'd say society, because I'm a little bit confused by this international society, international community. And so my question is, to the extent, what extent does Vittoria perhaps represent this notion of society of states, of international society, and pushing forward to Las Casas as a notion of international community of all kinds of humankind? In other words, the ontology here is one of the states working together like international society, but the community of all is you and I as individuals forming this community. And does Las Casas fit that kind of understanding of the kind of brotherhood and things you're discussing? So it's a more radical, Las Casas ends up with a more revolutionary, radical position than Vittoria.
Yes, thank you, Amanda Scott. It's really a pleasure to have you on board.
No, I really wanted to listen to you. I really wanted to listen to you.
And you are even a greater expert than myself. You are an expert in international relations. Yeah. But I must say, I chose Vittoria because he coined the the term Totus Orbis.
Yeah.
I wanted to oppose it to Civitas, you know, to national society against international society. That's why I chose Vitoria. Of course, I think, as you said before, perhaps you can develop the idea of Las Casas, because we are in Las Casas today. But because he didn't coin the term of some term that I can oppose to national society, I instead chose the term of Vitoria Totus Orbis. But I think both Las Casas and Vitoria idea of Totus Orbis, of an international community, is rather vague. There are not very strong bonds among people or individuals, only the common human nature. But there is nothing extra on that. There is not a construction. It's a basic human nature on that. That's my belief. We share our human nature. We are children of God. Of course, this the more important one, I think, bond among each other. But there is not a construction upon those ideas, as far as I know. Of course, because at the time there wasn't anything constructed already yet. No, you know.
Yes.
There wasn't international organization. People of Europe didn't share very much with America, of course, with Africa, with Asia people. So there was not a real interaction between individuals, between countries. The only thing that there was, and there is still and always, is this common bond of human nature. I think that's what they talk about, the only common bond, but nothing else, because it didn't exist anything else. But it's in the international society of nowadays, we have built many things upon this common shared human nature. We have built up international organization. We have cooperated a lot, and the thought I reflected upon. So this conception of Vitoria, Las Casas, let's say a little bit vague, and there were very basic conceptions, only sustained upon our common human nature. Well,
Carlos, can I ask another question, which is,
yes,
when
please.
you spoke about the way in which the horrors of World War II, if you like, drove a spirit of cooperation, a recognition that things could not be allowed to happen in that way again, that the Holocaust could not be allowed to be repeated. Is there a sense, you think, now that even with the failure, as it seems, of the United Nations as a forum, and the particular failure of the Security Council that you've outlined, is there a sense that the climate emergency is driving a similar sort of cooperation, both through the COP process and all the processes that go on alongside the COP process? I realize that process has no guarantee of success, but is there a similar way in which it's driving forward international cooperation through a different recognized common interest and common fear?
Yeah, perhaps you can give us your own opinion upon that, but I don't think so, I will say, because if you look at history, of course, there are some periods of cooperation, there are some periods of integration, but mainly those periods appears after very big wars. I see that the humanity, let's say, take the lessons from huge catastrophes. If we don't see a new catastrophe, we are not going to come back to cooperate intensely and to integrate among ourselves. That's the history of Europe. So Europe has been the field of many wars, of many battles throughout history, and integration and cooperation, strong cooperation, unity, and integration came only after 2 World Wars. We took the lesson, and then we started the way of cooperating, seriously cooperating among each other, or seriously integrating each other. And we achieved this European community, or European international community, as I said before. But in international global community, we need a war. I think only a war can be the alarm and can be, remind people that the war is not the way, and that we have to come back to cooperate among each other, like we did after World War II. But I don't see the environment fight at the same level of war. I don't feel that it shows the same consensus in the necessity of cooperation. I don't feel that. If there was a disaster, happened, perhaps yes, but so far, if not a huge disaster happened in the whole world, like pandemics, you saw that in the pandemics time, everybody looked at the World Health Organization, also international organization, because we individually, we cannot deal with this huge disaster. No? So only with great disaster, people try to come back to unity, try to come back to cooperation. Otherwise, if we live in a rich moment, or peaceful moment, everybody will go again in looking for selfish interest, and looking backwards, coming backwards to division. So I think humanity needs huge disaster to come back again to the track of cooperation and integration.
Okay. Dawi, do you have another question here?
Yeah, actually, I have 2 questions. So one question is, using this occasion, I have to go for my lecture also soon, so I, have to be active now. Yeah. So the first question is, because you mentioned Article 24, Paragraph 1 of the United Nations Charter. Yeah. So don't you think that this Article 24 is not a dead letter? It's not a dead letter. Is it really binding in practice? This is my first question. And my second question is, because you mentioned divisions, yeah? And then you mentioned the reasons of divisions, and I agree with you about all those things we forgot, like the idea of God, like the horrors of war, like of course also there's the growth of authoritarianism, there is the neglect of federalism, and so on. So I agree with those things, that this is happening, yeah? But the divisions. So when did it happen? When those divisions happen? Because in the past, if you have a look, for example, at the 19th century, at the 20th century, there were many wars, yeah, terrifying, events in the history of humanity. So when those divisions happen, after the Second World War, or how would you define the moment of those divisions? Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. First of all, to do your first question about if the Article 24 of the United Nations Charter is a dead letter or not, I think, I hope not. I hope not. But I have written an article recently about that precisely. I think we are on the brink of a death of Article 24, not only Article 24, but the whole United Nations Charter. We are on the brink of death. Much depends on the issue of the Ukraine war, in my sense. I think if Russia wins, we can say that United Nations Charter is definitively dead, for sure. If Russia doesn't win, if Ukraine resists or win, I think we can say that Article 24 is dying is in a very serious risk of death, but it's not yet dead. But if on the other side, or otherwise, if Russia wins, you are right, United Nations Charter, we can say that is dead already. But let's hope it is not the case. The problem is, as I said before, and then I come to your second question, when division broke out. Yeah. I think the two world wars are the alarms for international society or states to start working on the field of cooperation. They set up first the League of Nations after First World War, which was the first international organization, universal international organization, founded trying to look for the maintenance of international peace. In the Second World War, after the Second World War, humanity decided to set up another international global organization with the main aim of achieving the maintenance of peace in international society. So you see, you need two world war to convince countries, to convince states that the war is not the way to follow, that you need to look for peace, and you can achieve peace through cooperation only, I think, through working together in international organizations, sharing interests, working hand in hand with others. I think that it's the lesson taken from the European integration, that the conception of Jean Monnet, or the European founders, that the only way to unite people that have been making wars against each other is cooperating among each other, hand in hand. Like, that is the lesson taken from history. And that was what happened in the year 40 of last century, the building up of the United Nations. But then you see, immediately afterwards, the Cold War started, and we started a division between the Soviet Union and the Western countries, and then division started again. So you see, but fortunately enough, perhaps because of United Nations, due to United Nations, we haven't had so far a global war between the two blocks, and between Western countries and Soviet countries then, and now Russia, and so on. So thanks.
But we have many other wars. For example, we had a war in Korea, in Afghanistan, in Vietnam, another war in Afghanistan, in Libya, in Syria, in Yemen. There are still going on wars. Yeah, we do not talk about them.
No, of course, you are right. There are always wars, but I think, because we have forgotten God, we have forgotten the horrors of war, and we have forgotten the goodness of cooperation in international organization, through international organization, even to more intense unity, for example, through federalism. I think European Union is an example of also federalism. When you integrate countries in a strong bonds like European Union, you don't fight against each other. Now, thanks be to God, since World War II, we don't have great wars in Europe, affecting the normal protagonists of World War, like was France and Germany, and so on. So that is thanks to European Union, I think, because precisely of that, the forgetting of federalism, the forgetting of cooperation through international organization, we have the risk of war among the international society, but there are also a lot of wars. But as I said, it is because of these three factors that we mentioned before.
Can we bring Scott back in at this point?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, should I just restate there what I mentioned in my
Yes,
my
please.
chat? Okay, a number of years ago, Heather Warren published a wonderful book with a great title we're all going to love, called Theologians of a New World Order. And basically, this was empirical research on the role of Christian liberals and Christian realists in the United States in the founding of the United Nations, and also the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. I mean, can you imagine that in the 1940s, the Protestant churches in the US produced Sunday school materials to promote the creation of the United Nations? I mean, right now, that sounds absolutely shocking. And she goes through her research showing the surveys done in the US and how those backed up some of the actual provisions in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. And so the whole religious foundation tradition of behind some of these ideas has almost, to some extent, been written out of the literature. And I'm wondering, for the kind of multipolar world we're in now, in a globalizing multipolar world that needs to be embodied in the UN, the religious dynamics in the developing world, in the global south, for them to recognize these theological dynamics in the foundings of international order, does this help moving us in a more positive direction without the need for another world war?
Yeah.
I'm trying to get some hope out of here.
Thank you very much, Scott. I agree absolutely with you. Let's hope that you are right. I am not right. Yeah, I doubt that with your optimism, let's say war powers will move forward a sense or a strong sense of cooperation, that we move forward to creating more unity among each other. I don't think so, because at the same time we are witnessing this forgetting of God. So your solution comes from religious beliefs, sharing or spreading more intensely religious beliefs. Of course, I agree with you on that, but if you don't have those beliefs, if you don't have those strong beliefs, the idea of brotherhood disappeared a little bit, and then the only thing you have is the horror of the past, to avoid to commit the same mistake that your parents did. That's the only thing I see that can save us to come to disaster again. But of course, in a more positive way, and to try to avoid disaster, is to promote belief in God, our Father, and that, the Christian religion is, of course, is based on love and common understanding, So, but unfortunately, also we witness a loss of presence of Christianity in the whole world. That's why this crisis brought about, broke down.
Carlos, can I then ask, do you think that part of Pope Francis's agenda here is to, as it were, stretch the concept of brotherhood, or to develop the concept of brotherhood, to try and bring in other religions more closely, to be able to reassert that religious perspective, the perspective of the divine, through interreligious dialogue or through interreligious alliances with which to address some of these urgent social justice questions?
Yes, of course, I agree with you, Father Finn, and I would say there are always forces that fight for unity, and forces, people who fight for unity and peace. Many people, Christians, the Pope, of course, in the first front, and many others like Las Casas Institute, Blackfriars, and ourselves, no? That's why I proposed this topic, because I wanted to highlight, I wanted to people think about those ideas, how to avoid forgetting about war, and how can we can think, or we can have a look to the past to see what are the goodness of the way of cooperation, the way of working together. That's the only way to peace. So there are many forces and protagonists who are trying to avoid war and to promote unity and harmony in the world. And Pope Francis is one of the more important, but there are many others, I think, like Las Casas Institute in itself, Scott Thomas, and many others. Father Finn, I try to do also my best.
Yeah, your best is very good, Carl. we are very grateful. We are pretty much out of time this afternoon. We're hitting up against 3:30. So I really want to thank you very much for having taken us through this topic and really brought out very clearly the challenges and the dangers and as you say also, you know, these factors that have sharpened the danger for us and pointing us towards the importance of recovering that profound awareness of God, which helps us to also be neighbors in the global community. So thank you very, very much indeed. And thank you to everyone who has taken part this afternoon and participated in the discussion. Thank you so much.
It was a pleasure. Thank you to all of you. Thank you to Father Richard and to all of you. It's a pleasure to be part of this very interesting forum as Las Casas Institute, and it's an honor for me to be part of it. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you, and we look forward to the next round.